There is definitely a noticeable wheel speed dependent vibration. As I accelerate, the noise gets faster and faster. If your wheel does this, wheel bearing, you're done. If you still weren't sure after wiggling the wheel like that and the rotation, just look at this. Put the knuckle upside down in the vise. I have the spacer, the adapter plate on the apparatus of the press. Got the bolt shoved through the hub. I have that tapered nut. It is just small enough so that it will press the innards of the hub out of the internal race of that bearing, if that's making sense. That popped out extremely quickly. You can see what I'm talking about now. There's multiple sizes of adapters in this press kit from O'Reilly's, and once you get all the right pieces assembled, you shove the bolt through the hub, put the nut on the backside, wrench on this, and just pull her on out. As you can see, the inner race of the bearing is stuck on the hub, which is fine. We'll deal with that in a little bit. But now we're gonna take this apart, get this snap ring out of here, and then get the bearing pressed out. After repositioning the spindle in the vise, take a little center punch, look down in here at the snap ring, and you gotta get this guy broke free. So I'm gonna take this, pop it in here and tap on it and drive it this way and get this edge to break loose. Once you get it loosened up and free, you're gonna take some snap ring pliers. I have these ones that are reversible. Pop them in here like this and take the snap ring out. But these are not gonna be strong enough to break that free from the little rust bond that's got formed. With that snap ring removed, I repositioned it in the vise, gotten the press puller mounted up there with the horseshoe just the perfect size that'll actually hold itself right there. I'm gonna come around this back side. For me, it's the step washer size K, and it's gonna go right down in here, and it's just barely big enough, but that will press on that race right there. Putting this pressing washer in there and putting the nut on here, it will tighten and it will pull this bearing right out of the spindle. Now, I've gotten the new bearing in the freezer, so it has contracted a whole bunch, and we're going to essentially do the same thing but in reverse, and we're going to push it in this way. But there's a couple caveats, a couple different things that you need to know about before you just dive right in. In order to properly install the bearing, you need to pay attention to a few things. You're going to be taking a new bearing and pressing it in, so you're going to be pulling on this face. For my particular application, that's step washer O, fits nicely right in this circle. We're gonna run that bolt in this direction this time, and instead we're gonna be tightening the bolt in, pulling the bearing into the spindle. You have to get the right size washer for your bearing. For me, step washer M is the exact same size as the outer race of this bearing, and this will sit on here like this and will be what the bolt goes into to pull this bearing into the spindle. I'm going to be using this big flat washer along with this, I'll call it the pressing washer, so that way it gives me a bigger surface for the bearing face to hit. Because of the nature of the impact vibrating, I don't want to be going along like this and have this guy walk one direction or the other and push this bearing and crook it and get it jammed. So what I'll do is use this big washer along with this one to press like this on this bearing, so that way I'm never pressing on the inner race or the seal until the point where the bearing gets past this spindle face. You have to push the bearing about 1/8 of an inch in past this lip, which is what you're going to use this one for, so that way you can press in far enough to get that snap ring reinstalled. I wouldn't say this is a design feature, but it's definitely handy. The printing gives you a great reference point because as you're pressing in, you do need to seat the bearing all the way in so you can get that snap ring in. The text will be pushing in. It'll stop. You'll hear the impact tone change. That's when you know you're good to go. Flipping the spindle around in the vise again, I've now taken my punch and scraped out this groove that the snap ring lives in. I've applied a little bit of PB blaster inside of there so that hopefully it doesn't rust itself in forever. And we're gonna go ahead and get the snap ring pushed back in. What you just saw me do was getting the snap ring in and using a punch and chisel combination to work my way around and make sure that that snap ring got into its groove. You should be able to push on this and have the snap ring rotate and seat into its home. That way you don't ever have to worry about this coming out and your bearing being able to come out of the vehicle. Now we're at the point to deal with this inner race that I told you was stuck on there earlier. And this process is very hard, grueling, very difficult. Nope, it's really simple. Take a grinder, you're gonna cut into that race and you're gonna get it to go just through the race or just barely not through it. These are very, very hard metal, which means they're very brittle. Once you get most of the way through it, a punch will get down in that groove, split this apart, release the tension, no problem, and you'll be able to just walk this race right off the spindle. Should be easy. Repositioning the knuckle for the 1,000,000th time in this job. You're gonna take this and you're gonna press this in this way. And you need to pay attention to what you're pressing on. You're not pressing on this outer face anymore. You're gonna press on this this most internal face right there only. You wanna be pressing against this, pulling the shaft of this into here. You do not want to be pulling the bearing more. You do not want to put a huge side load on those. Get a washer that you need that is just big enough to sit right there. If you were to use the bigger washer and try to do that, you'd be putting a tremendous side load on these bearings that they're not made to handle, and you could possibly ruin that bearing. Also on this side, you're going to need to get a washer to set up inside of there. You cannot just put the nut on this. You'll ruin these splines. I've got it set up and ready to press, and you'll notice I can spin this hub this whole time. If at any point you're going along and you're getting a bunch of binding and this no longer freely spins, you need to stop because something is pinched wrong, something is crooked, this thing might not be centered in the hole. The other thing to pay attention to is you can push this so far in that this face here hits this spindle right there, and then it'll bind and it'll just be frozen. There's quite a big gap right there that you want to take up. You want that to be a little bit tighter. And the whole time you might have noticed me doing this. This is never bound up a single time. Ultimately, when you reinstall this in the car, the axle shaft is going to be coming through here and you're going to tighten the nut down to 136 foot-pounds. That's going to be your final torque on this. It is all pressed together and it freely spins. This is ready to go back on the car. With the torque wrench set to 136 foot-pounds, we're going to go ahead and torque down this axle nut. Now you might have a couple cranks because, as I said, this is the last final step of pressing together, so don't be alarmed if you turn it a couple times over. Out on the first test drive, and man, what a difference that makes. It's smooth. You get used to the vibration of it, and then I'm driving with the new bearings and it's like a different car. It's really nice. It doesn't make any noise, side to side. Hey, that's a wrap. If you're doing the wheel bearings on your 96 to 2000 or something Honda Civic, leave down in the comments. Tell me what you're working on. If you found the video helpful, leave me a like. If you think you could benefit from other content that I'm putting out, subscribe. I will see you guys on the next one.